we're going to begin with a little meditation and try to set our motivation. So we'll begin with meditation, watching the breathing, and then do the 9-round breathing meditation. And I know most of you have done that before, but a couple people, Louise, you weren't in the class where we did the 9-round. Oh, you were? Okay. And I forgot your name. Alicia. Alita. So we're going to do the 9-round breathing meditation where you breathe in one nostril, hold down at your navel. Imagine all of the negativity and illness and everything coming to the other channel, to the left channel. And when you breathe out, first you breathe in the right nostril, hold down there, and breathe out all the negativity slowly. But you'll be holding it down for some time. Hold, breathe in white light, all the inspiration of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and then you breathe out all your negativities that congregate in the right channel, all of the sickness and discursive mind, and slowly you imagine the white light and air force them out the right nostril, and then as you breathe in both nostrils, white light, hold at your navel, you imagine that they connect up to the central channel, and that white light then causes all of the rest of the discursive thoughts and illness to be purified within the central channel. Those are 3 rounds, and we do that 3 times. So first, just spend a few moments just doing the meditation that we have done for some time, just being mindful of the breathing without applying any force, just watching it to try to settle your mind. Then perform the 9-round breathing meditation very gently, but with good concentration. And focus your attention on the nature of your mental consciousness. It may help to follow one breath down to the area of your heart chakra. Just leave your attention there. Remind yourself you're not paying attention to the eye, ear, nose, taste, or touch consciousnesses. And focus on the nature of the consciousness, the conventional nature, clear light nature, within which all the thoughts arise, like a vast sky. And think, at present I have a rebirth of leisure and endowment that is highly meaningful, but difficult to find. And it's decaying with every moment. I'm approaching death with every instant. And at the time of death, I have no certainty whether I will find rebirth in the upper realms or the lower realms. The only refuge there is to protect me from that suffering is the Holy Dharma, the Buddha who taught that, and the Arya Sangha who have put it into practice. So with some understanding of the qualities of Dharma, main refuge, with confidence that that can protect us, the more that we understand about the Dharma, can protect us from harming others. It can protect us from the fears of samsara, even the fears of nirvana, if we take Mahayana refuge. With that aim in mind, I'm going to listen to the teachings tonight, participate in the class, listening, contemplating, even meditating on the meaning of the stages of the path, the Lam Rim, in order to attain enlightenment so that I can best protect all sentient beings, set them into a state of everlasting happiness most quickly. And then relax. Bring your attention back. So we've been talking about the Lam Rim, the stages of the path, and the four main outlines that I'm sure Lisa knows because she's even borrowed some DVDs over the vacation, and she'll probably know. What are the four main outlines of the Lam Rim text, Lisa? Do you know?
One is the greatness of the teaching. That's not the first one.
It's not the
The
first
greatness
one.
of the author.
Greatness of the author.
The greatness of the teaching.
Greatness of the teaching.
Relying on a spiritual teacher.
Relying on the spiritual side. Okay, sounds like something.
Is that the third one?
No, I don't know. Then?
Ways to rely on the teacher. Ways to listen.
Don, you can help Lisa fill in the details.
How to listen and explain the teachings. How to lead the student in the actual instruction.
Okay, so the first was the greatness of the author, what?
It's a noble origin.
In order to establish a noble origin or source, okay, then?
Teacher develop respect for the instructions.
Instructions, and does that have an in order to? No?
No, I don't think so.
Huh? Yeah, no, I said, does that have in order to? No, okay. And then? Then the fourth one? And that has outlines that Lisa's eager to say. What are those? You know? How to lead the student in the actual and teachings has. Anyone? How about Diana? You know?
How to rely on a spiritual instructor, and then how to practice the path once you've relied.
So how to rely on the spiritual guide, which is the root of the path, or who is the root of the path? Which do you think? The spiritual guide is the root of the path, or the reliance is the root of the path? Something to think about. Maybe both. Say something.
It's a teacher.
It's a teacher, isn't it? You came to that conclusion? Okay. And then the other one? How, once having relied on a spiritual guide, how to progress on the path, how to practice the path? Something like that? Let's see here. So if you look, it's good to make some flashcards or something, maybe flow chart. You can kind of see. So, how to listen to and explain the teachings has two parts. How to listen to, explain the teachings, how to lead the students, how to lead the students in the actual instructions. That's the fourth one. How to rely on the teaching, the teacher, the root of the path. There it doesn't say who or which, leaves it ambiguous. And the stages of how the students train their minds after having relied on the teacher. So we haven't reached that part yet. We're still on how to lead the students with the actual instructions, how to rely on the teacher. We've done that. A somewhat elaborate explanation and a brief indication of how to sustain the meditation. So which of those are we on? We're on a brief indication of how to sustain the meditation? Okay. So that has how many parts? Okay. Yeah, a little bit for the class. I just wanted you to. I know you don't want to go through this painful, but when Venerable George Rinpoche is here, he'll probably mention the outlines at each session. It's traditional in order for you to get a better understanding of where you are, how everything fits in. Also, as we learn about when you do meditation, you need to know the outlines. Venerable Rita, when you lead meditation courses, does it help to have? You give it to them, or you hand it? Okay, I thought you. Okay. So,
If they don't have it, they
feel a little bit lost. And ideally, of course, it's best if you can memorize the outlines. So here, the brief indication of how to sustain the meditation has parts. A, the actual way of sustaining the meditation, which has two parts. What to do in the actual meditation session, the preparation. We talked about the preparations, right? And now I think we're on the actual session, how to sustain the meditation in general, how to sustain the meditation specifically, and what to do in the conclusion, at the conclusion. And then we're going to talk about what to do in between sessions, the best places to go, which airlines to fly on, so forth. And then 6 refuting misconceptions about meditation. Okay, so, yes. Yeah.
A step behind in preparation. For number 5, on page 94, is it okay to go back?
Yeah. The cooperative conditions for the production of a path in your mind.
I don't understand the first one, the accumulation of the collections, which are favorable conditions.
Mm-hmm. So it says there's 2 cooperative conditions here. Okay, so what this is talking about can be kind of summarized by experience that Lama Khapa had. Can you hear me? It doesn't sound like the... Yeah? Okay. Experience Lama Khapa had when he requested Manjushri, with whom he had a direct communication with, the Buddha of wisdom, aspect of the Buddha's wisdom. And he asked Manjushri how one could make realizations most quickly. And Manjushri said there were 3 things that you had to do. You had to collect merit and purify negativity. There we go. You had to collect merit and purify negativity. That was one. You had to pray to the teacher, to your spiritual guide, as one with the Buddha, as one or one with your meditational deity, in order to receive blessings. And the third thing was to meditate. It wasn't enough just to, just to put effort into hearing, contemplation, and meditation. That would sometimes, if you had a big collection of merit from past lives, or if you were working at a Dharma center and collecting merit all the time, that might be a possibility. But Manjushri said that the first of those points, collecting merit and purifying negativities, are what are mentioned here. The accumulation of the collections. So what are the collections? Red Cross, World Life Fund, Greenpeace, merit, collection of merit and collection of wisdom. So how do you accumulate? Okay, so Lisa's going to answer very skillfully, I think. How do you accumulate the collection of merit?
How do you accumulate the collection?
Or how do you collect the accumulation of merit? You can translate either way.
Well, there's a number of ways to do it, but...
By meditating, because for instance, meditating on emptiness, can you collect merit that way? Or is that not a method?
I suppose that would be one way, but collecting merit, I think, would be more like doing deeds such as making offerings and...
Yeah. So what does merit mean, generally? Frank, do you know? Positive karma, virtuous karma, in general. And so when we talk about the 2 collections, just as a reminder, the collection of merit is the main cause, the substantial cause of attaining what? The Buddha's form body, the Rupakaya. It's this main substantial cause. It gives rise to the Buddha's ability to manifest. So collection of merit, which has to do with kind of conventional reality. Also, it's dealing with method generally. The collection of wisdom involves meditation on emptiness So when I was trying to trick you and you, okay, so when I asked that question, did meditation on emptiness, maybe certainly the motivation involved in setting about on meditation on emptiness would fall under merit, right? Say for instance, if you had, I'm going to meditate, if you had the motivation, I'm going to meditate on emptiness to overcome my problems or for the benefit of others, there would be merit accrued by that motivation and carrying out the action. But the activity of meditating on emptiness is actually accumulation of wisdom. So that is the substantial cause of what? Nirmanakaya? Nirmanakaya is one of the form bodies, right? Form bodies include the so-called emanation body, or Nirmanakaya, and the form body also includes the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body. So you could say the Dharmakaya has two kinds. We talked about this when we studied Uttara Tantra with Kirti Sentra Brahmshe. The Dharmakaya has two varieties. Do you remember, Don? Yeah? Do you remember, Sweden?
One was the luminous body.
The luminous body.
I can't remember what that is. Is that the Sambhogakaya?
Sambhogakaya is one of the form bodies, right? Okay, she wants to get the nature body, and that's nature body is one of them. Nature body, but the nature Dharmakaya we call Svavavikakaya. The nature, in Tibetan we say Ngo Ngiku, we could say the nature body. And then what's the other part of the? You could translate it essence body. You might have seen it that way somewhere. What's the other part of the Dharmakaya? The wisdom Dharmakaya. So we say the Yeshe Chuku, the wisdom Dharmakaya. So wisdom Dharmakaya actually means the omniscient mind. It's a conventional phenomena, but it's the Buddha's continuum of mind that has the ability to know all phenomena, both conventional and ultimate, simultaneously. The nature body is the ultimate reality of that, the ultimate nature of that. It's emptiness. So anyway, so when we talk about the two collections, the accumulation of the two collections, which are favorable conditions, so that means to collect merit, physical karma, through all different ways. Like for instance, the 7-limb puja is the supreme way. It's not just making offerings, making prostrations, reciting the names of the Buddhas, purifying. The second part, purifying your mind from obscurations, includes especially confession, which is, and the four opponent forces, which are the main means to purify negative karma. Does that kind of answer? Okay. Yeah, okay, now doubt, okay.
At times, right? Like say for example, if you're doing like an animal liberation and you're thinking about the emptiness of the animals, that's really building.
You're thinking about the emptiness of the animals. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing the act of liberating. So
right.
that would be a combination, wouldn't it be?
Would that be actual? What do you think, guys? Is that actual collection of the two, accumulation of the two collections at one time? Actually, it says in one of the advantages of Tantra, one of the special advantages of Tantra is that with one mind you can collect the two, you can accumulate the two collections simultaneously. So to actually collect, or to accumulate the collection of wisdom, I'm not sure, but I think actual collection of wisdom requires you to have be in meditative equipoise, direct realization of emptiness. Maybe it's something similar if you have an inferential understanding of emptiness that you're equipoised on. I don't think that's actually called a collection of merit, but something that leads to it. You can't eventually collect, I said wisdom, I said merit. It's not actually a collection of wisdom, I think. But without having trained in that, you can't actually collect wisdom. You can't actually accumulate the collection of wisdom. So when you're in, like say, a bodhisattva who's trying to integrate the practice of the six perfections, say, as you say, doing a virtuous action of liberating sentient beings, freeing them from fear and being captured and so forth. So at that moment, you are collecting merit, but the bodhisattva would try to entwine that with their understanding of emptiness. So understanding I, the individual who thinks they are freeing these animals, I am the agent. It doesn't really exist. You'd try to understand, recall, or even meditate momentarily on the emptiness of the I, and the recipient, the little or big. Have you freed anything bigger than yourself? No? Maybe we could get some small squids that could grow bigger and free them. I was just in Singapore, and Lieutenant Colonel now, Fred Cheong, our good friend there, he said he used to marvel and sort of think, almost he even had sort of negative thought, think, oh, how could Tara, the liberator, the female aspect of Buddha, how could Tara liberate 1 million people in the morning and 1 million people in the evening? Have you heard these kinds of stories? So he was beginning to do animal liberation, and he got crates of shellfish and other things, or different kinds of animals. Finally, he was able to discover that by buying some very small shellfish, mussels or some kind, in a huge container, he could liberate 1 million in one fell swoop. So he's been doing that for some time. In fact, I was having dinner with him and another friend, and they were musing over, wondering whether the days that they had liberated them in a certain strait, whether it had affected the weather on the other island that was just adjacent, because they'd heard rumors that shellfish were noticed coming up on the other side, so they dropped them in here, and that would probably fill in the land, under the sea underneath. So when you're doing that, you try to meditate on the recipient as being empty of true existence, the recipient of your kindness in this case, and the action as being empty of true existence. But unless you actually enter into meditative equipoise on emptiness, it's probably not real accumulation of wisdom, but maybe something similar. But even then, one doesn't have one mind which is doing both. You might be alternating. A bodhisattva might be able to alternate into meditative equipoise on emptiness, and then exit from that and view the situation and recall in illusion-like meditation on emptiness. In the post-meditative state, when they arise from that meditative state, still have the memory of that, and so that's entwined more closely. Okay, so that's what's meant by the collection. So those are some of the conditions necessary to make meditation successful. Lama Khapa said, if you have those, things can go quickly, and it's the experience of meditators that, just going off and trying to do meditation without having an accumulation of merit or having done a lot of purification, the realizations don't grow very quickly in the mind. It's a very powerful condition. Also, praying to the Guru as oneness with the deity, as oneness with the Buddha, say, to open the door of blessings to one's mind, faith, having faith. And then the other stage, the actual meditation involves hearing the teachings as we learn, not just going off and so-called meditating. You have to know what to meditate on and contemplate that, and then once you've gotten the right understanding, placing your mind single-pointedly on the conclusion of that meditation. Okay. So we've gotten up to the section on page 99 in this text. The actual session We talked about the preliminaries before. So this has two parts: how to sustain the meditation in general, and how to sustain the meditation specifically, or in particular, in this particular context. So the text says, that which is known as meditation is the act of sustaining an object of meditation, or familiarizing one's mind with an object of meditation, and the specific subjective aspects by repeatedly focusing your mind upon a virtuous object of meditation. What does it mean, the specific subjective aspects? Someone has already turned to the notes to check that out? No one's turned to page. Maybe you should check. There's some note you should go, what does that mean? 163 says, in this context, the object's subjective aspect, yulgi namba, yul means object and nampa means aspect, is the guru's being a Buddha, let's say in the context of guru devotion, and your mind's subjective aspect, yulchengi namba. You know what yulchen means, those of you who did Loreg, right? Diana, do you know what yulchen is? Object possessor. Subject, right? Yul means object, chen means possessor. So the subjective aspect is your faith of conviction that the guru is a Buddha. So these are things that you would, not just the, what's happening here? It's good. I feel I'm in jet lag. I'm in jet lag again. They're telling me we're going to land. Where are we landing? Yes.
I guess, could you just say that again about the object and then the subject, what you just said?
Right. Well, usually we have, like say for instance, if you meditate on the wristwatch. Where's my wristwatch? Here's somewhere. That would be your, say, your referent object. But if you were meditating on the impermanence of the watch, the watch would be your referent object, but the aspect with which you were meditating on it would be its impermanence. So it would be something that you would be, there would be the impermanence itself, which would be the objective aspect, and the subjective aspect would be your understanding of that, whether you understood that. Even if you were focusing on the objective aspect, you might not actually understand that. So you wouldn't necessarily have a subjective aspect of realizing that. So when we talk about different meditations, you may take something as your referent, like say the guru or the Buddha. Let's say, for instance, if you're taking refuge in Buddha or Dharma or Sangha, say if you took the Dharma as your referent object, here it says your object, by repeatedly focusing your mind upon a virtuous object of meditation. The purpose of this meditation, the purpose of this is felt from beginning to time. Where did we just have? I just missed this point here. We were just talking about these aspects. Oh, it's just is the act of sustaining an object of meditation and specific subjective aspects. So you're trying to sustain. Let's say, for instance, if you were meditating on Buddha. Maybe the image of Buddha before you, and in order to engender faith in the Buddha, you would be thinking about various qualities of Buddha, his knowledge and so forth. Okay. Yeah.
In whenever we come and sit, before we do the breathing, and then you often lead us to the place.
I'm glad you do the breathing.
Well, yeah.
Do the breathing meditation, yeah.
And we always do the breathing, we calm down, and you're always pointing us to something in which thoughts are arising, to try to look there. Is that the object holder we're supposed to be looking for? Like the ocean in which thoughts are swimming by?
The object holder. So here, this terminology, object possessor, the subject and object. So When we talk about the mind, every consciousness or mind has an object. Otherwise, the consciousness wouldn't arise. Even if you're not aware of an object, say you're just sort of thoughtlessly, you think you're just sitting thoughtlessly, the mind does have some object. So when we focus upon the mind itself, in order to be aware of the nature of the subject mind, we take that as an object. It's not usually what we do. Usually the mind itself is something which is called an other-knowing phenomena. What do we call it? Shenrik, something that knows other things other than itself. Here, one part of the mind we use to look at the mind itself. And the way that we look at the mind is one that has to develop over time, because the mind itself is something very, very subtle or luminous, very almost transparent. So the way that we can begin to sense the presence of the mind is by one part of the mind noticing that there are thoughts within the mind, mental images, and they themselves come and go, and in a sense like the fish in an aquarium travel through the medium of the water, those thoughts themselves travel through the medium of the mind, the substratum of the mind. So the mind, if we consider this observer, this part of the mind looking, the mind itself is a subject. The thoughts within it, the mental images, are objects through which they're actually appearing objects, via which we know other objects. Anyway, they're kind of objects. The mind itself is a subject, that is an object possessor. And we are, in this context, one part of the mind is looking at the rest of the mind, and in this case, the mind is taken as the object of that other part of the mind. In general, though, when we talk about, in general, the mind can be an object, but in general, when we just talk about subjects and objects, we say the mind is the subject and other things other than mind are the object. Okay.
The topic, then in that schema that you described, when doing guru devotion, that particular topic, maybe one would be visualizing Shakyamuni or Lama Khapa, and then that's the object that the mind isn't like looking at itself the way we do at the beginning of class, but it's
Well, yeah, there's different kinds of meditation. The meditation on the clear light nature of the mind obviously takes the nature of the mind as its object. Actually, the referent object is the mind itself, but the aspect with which you're trying to understand that is its nature, its clear light nature. When you're meditating on the Buddha, that's a completely different meditation. Or if you're doing guru devotion, it's completely different meditation. You're not meditating on the clear light nature of your mind at that time. Leave that behind. That's just a method to, that's a very profound method to develop concentration, to understand the conventional nature of the mind, to take that as your object of concentration, to get to be a precursor to understanding emptiness. But here, when you're meditating on the guru, you're not focusing on the subjective mind as trying to inquire whether it's clear light or anything. You take the object, the guru, and you try to instill in your mind faith. Or what's the other quality you try to instill? Faith and devotion, right? Faith you mainly develop through what? Do you remember? Remembering the knowledge or qualities, and devotion through remembering the kindness and so forth. Okay, so just sort of if you get that in. So we've gotten one sentence here done. Let's go a little bit further. The purpose of this is as follows. That was my fault. I like to. Okay, that's good. So what was the purpose of what? The purpose of meditation. Okay. From beginningless time, you've been under the control. We have been under the control of our minds. Our minds have not been under our control. That's a very important thing. Usually, the thoughts that come to your mind come randomly, it seems, due to karma, due to juxtaposition with input from your senses, and your responses to them are not under your control. So in a sense, your mind controls you. Maybe in some senses, your mind controls me too, if you give me orders or something like that. But in general, and my mind controls me. What would be the ideal, Buddha said, is that we control the mind. So here's an interesting question for you. When we say we control the mind instead of the mind controlled us, your mind has not been under your control. From beginner's time, you have been under the control of your mind. Your mind has not been under your control. If your mind was under your control, who is the you, Venerable, who is controlling the mind? The person.
Part of the mind.
Part of the mind? She
Well, the
pauses carefully. Make sure.
I said the person. Okay,
Oh,
let's go.
okay, you don't want to go any further then? Okay, so the person, yeah, it's interesting because you might say, well, what else controls the mind other than the mind? Yeah. So you have to think about that. When it says, from beginningless time, you have been under the control of your mind. Certainly you could say let's say if you talk about your body as being one of the 5 aggregates upon which you impute or designate the person, your body has been under the control of your uncontrolled mind, right? Just due to impulses coming up because of karma in the past, because of the juxtaposition with certain conditions now, causing different thoughts and emotions to rise. And without control, without controlling the mind, your body, your mind engages in certain motivations, your body follows through, your speech follows through. We have not been able to control the mind controls us. Your mind has not been under your control. Furthermore, your mind tended to be obscured by the afflictions and so forth. Thus, meditation aims to bring this mind, which gives rise to all faults and flaws, under control, and it aims to make it serviceable. Serviceable. Not like going into the army or something. Serviceability means that you can direct your mind as you wish toward a virtuous object of meditation. Where does that serviceability, how does that come about? Anyone know? Tenzin, have you heard that term before? Serviceability of the mind? What's another word? It's related with pliancy, yeah. More with pliancy. That is, when the mind develops this kind of serviceability or pliancy, which is the fruit of attaining the 9 stages of that lead the 9 stages of the mind that lead to calm abiding. When one achieves that, very calm state of mind through concentration with great effort, then one has a certain serviceability of the mind. That means you could put your mind wherever you want. Right now, although you might think you can do that, it's hard to think about things that are difficult, either because they require a lot of concentration or because they're not pleasant to think about, like the hell realms or your faults or something like that. So serviceability means that you can direct your mind as you wish toward a virtuous object of meditation as long as you wish. You might try to sustain your meditation by jumping to this and that object of meditation. You may consider setting up, according to your wish, a variety of virtuous objects of meditation in no specific order. So when I was in Singapore, this is something that happens here quite often too. We were doing some meditation in a unit on the mind, potential of the mind, and I asked the people to do meditation with me. And afterwards, I was asking people, so I was just checking, did you do that meditation? And he was talking about something else. I said, but did you do the meditation I suggested? And he said, no, I didn't do that. I was just meditating on the third eye. And so very often when we meditate, almost even in a class when the teacher is suggesting, leading us in a particular meditation, we just do our own thing. Now, I won't take a poll here to see how many of you do your own thing when we meditate. I'm afraid to find the answer. Maybe I'll poll you individually so I can take it one at a time. But maybe you can just write anonymously, write anonymous email through some server that's from Denmark or something that comes by. I'm not saying my name, but I'll be able to tell from the spelling if you're English or not, whether you spell properly. So we have our own, like we might think meditation, okay, I'm going to do a meditation retreat, and you just, whatever comes to your mind, moving thoughts, the beach, the sky, eternity, your mother, I don't know. One thing after another, you might call that meditation, but that is not, as Lama Khapa says, just moving your mind from one thing to another, jumping to this and that object of meditation. You may consider setting up, according to your wish, a variety of virtuous objects of meditation in no specific order, like this. Though you may do this, you will not be able to take up your object of meditation with this method. You will not be able to take it up. That means you won't be able to really concentrate on it. Consequently, you will greatly hinder your mind's ability to be directed as you wish toward a virtuous object of meditation. If you've made this a habit from the start, the virtuous practice of your whole lifetime will be flawed. So, So when we try to meditate, when you try to meditate, say if you're meditating on the clarity of the mind, and you've taken that as your object, let's take that as an example, and at that moment, Tara clearly appears to your mind, and you might be tempted to meditate on Tara. In general, Tara is also a virtuous object, right? But in this particular context, you can see that simply according to your wish, something changes in your mind and you wish to meditate on something else, that won't lead to progression on your actual object. So at that point, Tara or Shakyamuni Buddha actually becomes a hindrance if you focus on that. It's not that it's a non-virtuous object in general, but you should try to follow through with the object of meditation that you've engaged in. Therefore, from the beginning of your meditation, firmly determine the definite order and enumeration of whatever objects of meditation you wish to sustain. So this is the importance of memorizing the outlines. Okay, you may within the outlines you may have some latitude about how to analyze them. So, for instance, if you're meditating on death, you want to remember first there are 3 main points. Right? Death is definite, the time of death is uncertain or indefinite, and at the time of death nothing helps except the Dharma. And then each of them has 3 reasons. So there's 9 points to meditate on. And in any one session you might, in certain circumstances, you might meditate on all 3 points, 9 reasons, or you might just meditate on 1 point, the first point say, and 3 reasons, or just one of the reasons. But within that, there will be some latitude because you try to, in analyzing, in meditating that way, you'll bring up examples from your own life. You'll try to see if it explains everything that you've encountered or if there's any contradictions and so forth. So you don't set every kind of order, but the general object of meditation, when you're meditating on death, you don't start meditating on something else. Okay? Then, strengthen your will by repeatedly thinking, I will not set up something that is different from what I have determined. Without exceeding or falling short of what you've determined, sustain your meditation with mindfulness and vigilance. Mindfulness and vigilance. You know those words, right? Mindfulness, you know? What's vigilance? Carrie, do you know what vigilance is? Is that something we studied before? Is this a new concept? Good? Okay. Okay. Is it a virtuous mental factor, or is it, can it be either? Or is it categorized? Is it in the ever-present mental factors or object as? This is for...
It's omnipresent. I think it's...
Yeah,
I get the
certainly
sense
in our minds it's certainly not omnipresent. Right? As I said, that probably was not omnipresent, right?
develop it. And it's a wakeful state of really staying focused on the object. You stay attentive. If you're drifting off of the subject, you bring yourself back to it. That's what I'm recalling.
Okay, what kind of analogy, that's close, what kind of analogy, what do we sometimes call it? What kind of person or novel character might we liken it to? I'll give you a hint. Kind of like a spy or guard, right? That's one part of our mental energy. It goes into being vigilant, whether you're actually holding the object of meditation, or whether your mind is scattering, or whether your tenacity, the degree at which you're holding the object, has loosened and your mind is beginning to sink, and so forth. So that's the aim of vigilance. Like in the 8 verses of Training the Mind, there's one verse that could be translated something like, vigilant of my mind stream throughout all actions. Vigilant of my mind stream throughout all actions. Whenever delusions arise, whenever afflictions arise, endangering myself and others, I will confront and avert them without delay. So vigilance itself doesn't apply the antidote, right? Vigilance notes that something has happened. And like in World War II, supposedly when the Japanese were sending planes, and mainly planes, to bomb Pearl Harbor, there were some outposts that had some the radar signals that seemed to say that they were coming. So they sent that message to the Central Command, but no one took any notice of it, right? So there was some vigilance, something was happening. So the same thing, we might notice something is happening, but our mind is lazy and we don't know the antidotes. Maybe we, like the example I've given of, who did I use the example? Probably Carrie. Carrie and I were training for the Army. Did I ever use that example? Basic training. We get drafted. Carrie might still conceive of, I'm a little bit of a nutcase, a bit old, so it's hard to see how I'd be drafted at this time. But say we're drafted for the Army, and we go through basic training, but during that time we're reading Freak Brothers comic books. What else do you have in your collection, Carrie? Don't tell me, no. And other things, and we don't actually train. We don't read the manuals how to run the tanks and the howitzers and the guns. Then when the enemy is coming, although we see them coming, we're vigilant in a sense. We don't know how to, we say, oh, how do you run this darn thing? At that point it's too late, right? So you have to know the antidotes. The vigilance has to be coupled with knowing the antidotes and how to apply them, practicing that, so that when the enemy of the afflictions come, you can apply the antidotes. Yes. Did you say terrible, George?
No, I said venerable.
Oh, okay.
This is something that I always sort of trips me out, because it's almost self-referential, isn't it? I mean, the mind alerting itself that when the mind begins to drift. And I found myself doing this where my mind drifts. And sometimes, I'm alert, but then I stop being alert because I'm drifting.
Okay.
And, 10 minutes later, I'm going, oh, wait a minute, and I've developed the entire plot line for a story, and I've got...
I hope you make lots of money with that one. Yeah, that can happen. So we have to, it's like this, the example that's sometimes given of vigilance also is like, say for instance, if, excuse me, if someone were to give you some substance in a bowl to carry. When you were a kid, your mom said, here, carry the gravy to the dining table, and it's filled to the brim. He said, why did you fill it? Anyway, you have no choice. It's filled to the brim, hot gravy. And you've got to maneuver through baby sister and Uncle Harry telling jokes and people smoking cigars into the dining room without spilling a drop, or else your mom is going to ground you for, you spill the gravy on the carpet. So you've got to be really vigilant all the time. You can't allow your mind to start thinking about Uncle Harry's jokes or baby sister on the floor. You've got to avoid them and keep on going. So that kind of vigilance has to be set up particularly, that factor of the mind, that mental factor, alertness or vigilance, we say sheshin in Tibetan, that has to be, one part of the mental energy has to be invested in that. You have to actually train in that to have that facility. If you're not, you're kind of, what would you say, autistic child is vigilant? Not sure. Maybe there's some states of would you say a autistic child might lack vigilance? Yeah. No? Pardon me? Yeah. So that might be one thing they're like. I'm not sure. There might be some kinds of autism where they're alert to what's going on, but so it depends on how engrossed you are into something else and just doing what you want. So vigilance is important to watch what's happening in the mind. So if you really do have real vigilant state, you set up beforehand, I'm not going to write a novella or a novel or a chapter or anything else in this meditation session. I'm just going to watch the mind. And if my mind wanders, I'm going to apply the antidote of bringing it back. And of course, to bring it back requires that you have a memory of the object. So you think, I'm going to bring it back to the object that I'm trying to familiarize with in memory, in mindfulness. And if I lose it completely, I'm going to have to reanalyze to get that object again, the clarity of the mind, or Buddha Shakyamuni, or death, or whatever.
The things that they would talk about was that posture had a dramatic impact on your ability to maintain mindfulness and to maintain single-minded concentration. Is that?
Yes, we talked about at the beginning about sitting in the 7-point or 8-point posture that's associated with Vairochana Buddha, the Buddha that exemplifies the form aggregate. In the Zen tradition, they don't necessarily talk about each of those postures the same, but that a certain posture it's recognized the importance of that posture to good concentration. So before we get to the second section, let's take a little break because I know you're a bit fatigued. So Don was asking about the question, so he was thinking one way, the question about when it said, since beginningless time, you have been under control of your mind has not been under your control, something like that, right? So he was trying to think if you could apply some of the understanding of the different tenet systems where they say that if you look for an illustration of the self, or you, person, that you can posit it as, some of them posit it as the mind, some of the tenets. Did anyone think about that? Because you're supposed to listen, contemplate, and meditate, right? So did you come to any conclusion, or is it too short a time to have what do you think, Mark?
That contemplation earlier, and I didn't come to an end result.
Okay. I thought you said you were in that cult.
Too, but
Tenzin, what do you think? If you say, you, Tenzin, have been under the control of your mind, but your mind has not been under your control. Who's the you when we're talking about?
There's no I and there is no you, so
It seems like...
And there's no A and O either.
Right, it seems like there's anarchy going on in my brain. So I'm not quite sure who you is or who I is. I'm losing control here.
Sounds like
Control sounds like you've got serious issues.
sounds like serious issues. Sounds like little Abner also. Yeah.
Get into this meditation. That's what I'm suggesting.
What was that?
Therapy.
Okay, well,
There's no you.
yeah.
Okay, so is that true, what Tenzin's saying? Maybe he's being joking or maybe he's being serious. Is there no, would you agree with Tenzin's position that there is no you or no Tenzin or no I?
There's in our diluted state, we have these conventional notions, and I suppose that's where we start. If I could have a complete view of emptiness and a complete experience of it and an understanding of it, then I could, if I were a Buddha, I could see things in both their conventional and in their ultimate reality.
Okay, this is getting a little bit
Out of hand here. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, no, I have to accept. Yeah, no. Basically, we say our position as followers of Lama Khapa, as admirers of the Madhyamaka and the Prasangika, is that there are two levels of truth. There is ultimate truth and a conventional truth. And there is a conventional Tenzin. So from Tenzin's point of view, there is an I, conventional I, which later, as one develops wisdom, one can start to understand how that I appears and functions. But that I is empty of being truly existent. There is an actual referent object, something that you refer to or you observe when you meditate on the emptiness of the self. It's not as though there's no self whatsoever, but the self that does exist, the conventional self, which is merely imputed upon the five aggregates, that is empty. That itself is empty of existing truly. It only exists as a designation, as a concept, but it appears to our mind to be findable. So when the Buddha said there's no I or there's no you or no self, no A, E, I, O, or U, or any when he said these kind of things, he didn't mean that there was no conventional reality. He was talking about the sense of an I, the sense to Tenzin's mind, the sense to George's mind, let's say in my mind, the sense of a truly existent I. Subtle apprehension in the mind, subtle appearance to the mind, and an assenting to that, a grasping to that. That is the problem. The appearance of the I as truly existent, that's what the Buddha said doesn't have a, something that it refers to in reality. It appears, but like a mirage appears, but like the mirage is empty of water, the self, the truly existent self that appears is empty of what we conceive it to be. But even when you take away that mirage, that kind of self, there's still the mirage, there's still the conventionally existent self that does exist, as Leo was saying, for the deluded mind. It appears, but it can't be said to be non-existent. It can be verified by conventional minds, conventional valid cognizers. So that I, the conventionally existent Tenzin, has been under the control, say this lifetime, because previous lifetimes in other continuities of mind, you weren't necessarily called Tenzin. Probably sometime in the past you were called Tenzin. Probably many lives, over numberless lives, you were called Tenzin some of the time. But your last life you weren't necessarily called Tenzin. So just this lifetime, Tenzin has been under the control of his mind, but the mind has not totally been under Tenzin's control until he started to put some effort into, finding the means to do that, to put the mind under his control. So vigilance has to do with this, but that's not the only factor. To come under the control of your mind, to come under your control, to put your mind under your control means that the mind, you don't allow the mind full reign. For instance, right now, different discursive thoughts come up in the mind. When you meet, you see a nice glass of, what can we say, apple cider or something really attractive. And even though you OD'd on apple cider before, still the attraction of it, you see with your, you see that object with your eyes, and there's a memory of the taste of it or something. So the mind desires that. Desire arises in the mind. And if you're not vigilant, if you haven't made a decision, or you hadn't analyzed the situation and recognized that this is something that you could overdo and could be detrimental if you overdo, if you're not vigilant, then that attachment can overwhelm you. You're not under your control. You're under the control of the attachment, because it's almost as though you identify with the attachment. I want that. You don't see that there is the possibility of countering that. There are many, as we learn in the Lam Rim, there's many stages that you have to understand. You have to see the defect of attachment. Otherwise, you might not even think. Even if you had the control of the mind, you might think, heck, I'll go for it.
Interchangeable?
Addiction would be a form of attachment, certainly. Attachments, many attachments are addictions. People are addicted to many things. Chocoholics. You know what chocoholics are? It's a very popular word in America now, right? Do you know what that is, Luis? Chocoholism?
Act out.
Well, vigilance alone, it's say you just notice, I have the temptation to grab this glass of cider or this piece of chocolate. You know, even if you notice that, you may not have the willpower, the antidote to overcome that. You might try to, how to cause some kind of distraction or something, So how do you counteract attachment? First of all, you have to recognize it. So say if it's addiction or whatever, understand the shortcomings. Really, that's one of the main things that people neglect. Although they can recognize that they have attachment or addiction, they don't necessarily recognize the shortcomings of it. So recognize karmically the shortcomings, not just the shortcoming this lifetime, but the karmic shortcomings in future lifetimes, habitually being under the influence of attachment, and the karmic result of not finding what you want in the future, and so forth. Understand all of the different shortcomings of attachment. No, that is what can impel us to apply the antidote. That's the factor, the wisdom that you have in your mind, that once vigilance or alertness notices that attachment or addiction is rising, isn't that? That's the factor, that's the reservoir that impels you. Oh, you better do something about it. Otherwise, if you don't have that thought that there's something wrong, and you don't know there's an antidote, those two things. You have to see the faults and you have to know the antidotes. The alertness is what alerts you to the fact that this dangerous situation is there, that this thing that has all these faults is present, and reminds you to apply the antidotes. If you don't know the antidotes, there's nothing to apply. You just say, oh, there it goes again, or you feel miserable or whatever. So you need to know the antidotes to attachment. So for instance, we talked about the antidotes many times, meditating on impermanence, meditating on the fact that the object of attachment is not true happiness, is not an object of true happiness, a source of true happiness. All it does is reduce one suffering but replacing it with another. replace the itch, the thirst to be, say, satiated with satiation. The satiation itself, we don't notice it as suffering until it gets bigger than the thirst for that. And then we feel we've had too much, or intoxication, or whatever, being close to something. To recognize, the object of attachment as impure. So analyzing it as, how it's broken down into the body, into atoms. There's nothing in molecules and how it produces factors that cause undesired side effects or main effects, so forth. There are different ways of meditating on the antidotes, different antidotes to use. Ultimately, the antidote to attachment is meditation on emptiness. To recognize that there is a sense of I which fuels the attachment. I want that. I want to have some relief. I. Recognizing that I does not exist the way that the mind conceives it to exist, that takes all the air out of the balloon. There's no chance that attachment can arise. Also, the bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of the object, whether it be, chocohol, or alcohol, or any other kind of sexahol, or movie-ahol, whatever kind of thing you are addicted to. Yeah, a lot of people are loveaholics, aren't they? They're addicted to being loved. And even if they're not sexaholics, even if they're not addicted to sex, although that can get into the equation, they spend a lot of time looking for that, their whole lives. It's an enterprise of their whole life. So sometimes for an alcoholic, there might be an enormous amount of time spent in getting and setting up situations to get alcohol, or to find situations where you can get it, or chocolate, or sex, or power, or money. We're addicted to many different things. But here, the question that Don was asking was, when you talk about you have been under control of your mind, the mind has not been under your control, who is the you? What is the you? So anyway, I'm going to leave that for you to think about, like some of the other questions. So if I just give you my opinion, then you won't think about it. So next, how to sustain the meditation specifically. So how to sustain the meditation in general, we just talked about, right? What did that have to do with? You had to keep your mind on the object. You had to get in control of your mind. And it was this factor of the particular idea, insight, that you can't just set your own agenda. You try to set some specific ordered agenda of meditation and follow that, not allow your mind to go to any object that it wishes, just to sort of playfully dance around. Now, how to sustain the meditation in particular in this context? First, reflect on the benefits of relying on the teacher, because this is the context in which we're talking about sustaining meditation, talking about the meditation on devoting oneself to the spiritual guide. So you would, first of all, you would do breathing meditation, let's say, try to set up a proper motivation, having taken refuge in generating bodhicitta, then reflect on the benefits of relying on the teacher. For instance, such as quickly attaining Buddhahood. There are 10 benefits, we say, or 8 benefits, right? Or 10. How many benefits are there? Yeah. Sure? Not 10? They say, oh, good. Okay, so that's good. Strong. And the drawbacks of not relying on the teacher, such as giving rise to suffering of this and suffering in this and future lives, such as not meeting teachers in future lives, so forth. It's hard enough this lifetime, isn't it? Then think many times with an attitude of restraint, I will never allow myself to conceive of faults in my guru. After considering any of your guru's good qualities that you know, such as ethical discipline, concentration, wisdom, being learned, and so forth, meditate on them until you produce a faith that has the aspect of mental clarity. Remember when we talked about faith, one of the kinds of faith was called lucid or clarifying faith. So it's talking about meditating in that way. Then, in accordance with the sutras cited earlier, contemplate how your guru's kindness has been and will be helpful to you. So this is meditating to develop devotion. Meditate on that until you develop respect or devotion from the depth of your heart. So this is talking about how, basically, this is not just a intellectual exercise that you read in the textbook, how to relate to the spiritual guide. One actually meditates on that. So you do analytical meditation. You take to mind the spiritual guide's qualities, their knowledge, that are those 10 qualities that one recognizes, that are mentioned in the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, or other lists of qualities. And having thought about the defects of not relying on the guide and the benefits of doing so, one tries to develop that faith, that root faith in the guide as being an emanation of Buddha, taking quotations into an emanation of Buddha, as taking quotations into account. That Vajradhara promised that he would, in this degenerate age, he would appear in the world as a teacher. It was just up to us to recognize him. And how the guru is kind of like the lens that can focus the blessings of the Buddhas into our minds. How it's something that that our opinions are not reliable, that the guru is not the Buddha. There's so many things that we're wrong about conventional things, let alone that. And how bodhisattvas appear in the world now. They must be appearing. Who else, if my guru is not the Buddha, who else is? So meditating in those different ways. And then trying to develop. Then once, say, a mind of faith arises due to that analysis, then holding that single-pointedly without letting your mind get distracted to anything else. If the mind begins to lose the object, try to recall it. That sense of faith, once the sense of faith has declined, so it can't just be recalled, you have to engage in analysis again. Right? So the same with all of the different kinds of meditations. Same general kind of procedure. Okay, what to do at the conclusion of the meditation. We had what to do at the beginning, that included various preparations, cleaning the place, and 7 limb puja and so forth. And then what to do in the actual session, which was being vigilant and having a particular order and how to do that meditation. What to do at the conclusion, by means of such prayers as the Prayer of Samantabhadra. What is the Prayer of Samantabhadra? Praying to become Samantabhadra, or what? Venerable. Tenzin.
I have a question. It's not about the prayer. It's about
Okay. Okay.
If one didn't have a guru, wasn't fortunate enough perhaps in his lifetime to have one, how would you do that meditation? I'm a little confused.
You could take Shakyamuni Buddha. For instance, if you considered yourself a Buddhist, you could take Buddha as your guru. Or you would seek amongst those teachers that you received teachings from. For instance, if you had the fortune to go to, where was it, Montreal, and receive the Kala Chakra initiation from the Dalai Lama, you could just take a 2x4 and hit your head several times and say, "He's my guru. What are you thinking about?" You know? A clue by 4. Yes, that's called a clue by 4.
I think they have the metric system.
Oh, okay. So it might be called something else. But say, "You stupid jerk. You've met the most pristine and, perfectly identifiable guru. What am I thinking of?" You could kind of talk. It could be you talking to you. Maybe you talking to the mind, trying to control the mind. One part of your mind is saying, "Oh, where am I going to find a guru?" And just remind yourself. Also, even if you've only seen videotapes of the Dalai Lama, you can take him as your guru. Or read his writings. Or if you are, depends on the agility of your mind, the strength of your mind. sometimes you might have many individuals who have taught you who, if you have the right perspective, you can consider them objects of your practice because they have the qualities of a Mahayana guru, or many of them. And that in practicing in that way, you can accumulate merit more rapidly, you can get closer to enlightenment, and that they themselves are, fulfilling the definition of guru. So you don't have to find some, I don't know what people imagine. If you've met the Dalai Lama and you had that thought, I don't know what you need the clue by for anyway. Okay. So my question was, by means of prayers such as the Prayer of Samantabhadra, what's the Prayer of Samantabhadra? It's sometimes called the King of Prayers, the Prayer of Good Conduct. So it's a prayer that Kirti Senchab Rinpoche taught here last year, right? He taught it over 3 different sessions. And it's said that it encompasses the essence of the 10 millions of prayers that bodhisattvas on, which bhumi do the bodhisattvas practice the perfection of prayer? Do you know? Maybe 10th? No, 10th bhumi, probably not. Maybe 7th or 8th bhumi, perfection of prayer, you can check. There are many kinds of prayers that we can make and dedications, but this particular kind of prayer, very extensive prayer of Samantabhadra, talking about the bodhisattvas, aspiring to the bodhisattva's deeds. Sometimes it's not called the prayer of Samantabhadra. Some people want to say the vow of Samantabhadra. I think in Tibetan we say Monlam, the path of aspiration, which means kind of gives more of a flavor of prayer rather than vow, but one can understand it. It's not just hoping that these things will happen, but sort of making more than an aspiration. May they happen. I will do these things. I will achieve the bodhisattva's practices and so forth. So by means of such prayers as the Prayer of Samantabhadra and the aspiration in 70 verses, 70 stanzas, do you know that prayer? By whom? No one looked in the footnotes. So you should think, okay, maybe next time he's going to ask what's in the footnote. So who wrote this one? Diana knows. What was it? Number 164. Arya Shura. Who's Arya Shura? It's not. It's another footnote. So Arya Shura was one of the great saints, one of the Indian saints, post Buddha. Was Arya Shura the same as Ashvaghosha? Does it say that? Pardon? Some people say Ashvaghosha and Arya Shura are the same. Maybe some scholars say different. So this is a prayer of aspiration also, maybe not as well known as the Prayer of Samantabhadra. What does it say? Oh, I see. It's just the Tibetan for that, for Arya Shura. So by means of prayers such as these, dedication prayers, dedicate the virtue that you've accumulated. It doesn't mean that those are the only, that you have, every time you do a session, you have to say this long prayer of Samantabhadra, but we often do recite, when we do recite prayers, we often recite some of the verses of that. Like there's a verse that says, Jampel Pao Jita Kempanang, just as Manjushri and Samantabhadra knows, and so forth. Those verses come from the Prayer of Samantabhadra. Also, what Jangchub Semchog Rinpoche, Make Panam Kegachik, may the bodhicitta which is not yet arisen arise, and so forth, also comes from that prayer. Other prayers, other verses that we say come from that prayer. So do it, that is the dedication, with an aspiration so strong that it will be the cause of fulfilling your provisional and final aims. Meditate in this way during 4 sessions, pre-dawn, morning, afternoon, and nightfall. So this is interesting because in some traditions, it's said that you should meditate when the sun rises and at noon, and when the sun sets and at midnight. Have you heard that? Some yoga traditions. Buddhism says exactly the opposite. You should meditate before the sun rises, not just when the sun is starting to rise, that you should have broken your session by then. And then sometime in the mid-morning, before noon, well before noon, then afternoon, and after the sun sets. And you could make it more than 4 sessions. You could break it up into many sessions. But it's said that in Buddhism, it says that when you meditate, say when the moon, well, I said the moon, sun. Did I say moon before? The sun. When the sun is directly overhead, the vibration has a tendency of causing the mind to be scattered and so forth. So it's not the best time to meditate, nor at dawn, just when the sun is rising, because the whole activity around one and the whole dependent arising is such that things are changing, and it's not conducive to stabilize the mind. So usually we meditate. If you're doing a retreat, you do 4 sessions, one before dawn, and then you break, and at that time you make breakfast, have breakfast, or if you're having breakfast, and do some whatever other virtuous activities one might be doing, as it'll say here. And then before lunch, do another session, and then before midday, and then after midday, usually you take a longer break because lunch might be your only meal or your main meal, and you might be more, you might have more tendency to be sleepy right after that, so you take a little bit longer break after lunch and start sometime 2:30 or 3, something like that, 4, and then do another session until before the sunset, and then take another break. You have tea or whatever, and then the evening session after the sun sets. Okay? Furthermore, if at first you meditate for a long time, you will be readily susceptible to laxity and excitement. If this becomes your habit, it will then be difficult to correct your awareness. Therefore, meditate in many short sessions. If you end your session while still wanting to meditate, you will be eager to re-enter such future sessions, to re-enter each future session. Otherwise, it is said that you will feel nauseous when you see the cushion. Maybe not nauseous, but I mean, you can kind of like, I'd rather do something else, you know. You sometimes out of enthusiasm, you sit for too long. You think things are going well, and you don't, with alertness, you don't put a limit on how long you sit. So if you fatigue yourself a little, then the next time you are about to, you know, you're scheduled to sit in your 4 sessions or more sessions a day, you kind of have a hesitancy to do so. Nauseous, I mean, it could be, but you know, there'd be some hesitancy. Do you notice that? Yeah. So if you stop the session before you reach a point of being tired, and you still have the thought that you could go longer, then the next time you are to sit down, you'll view your meditation cushion as something desirable, a nice place to sit. Also, to do short sessions, you don't have to do one long session in the morning, say after breakfast, before lunch, you might think, oh, you have to do a long session. You can break that up into many, many short sessions, especially if you're trying to develop very good concentration. The longer you sit before the mind is trained, the more chance there is of becoming sleepy or distracted, and the whole session is lost. So even in 1 minute or 2 minute intervals, you might meditate. Say if you're meditating on Guru devotion or on the image of Shakyamuni or whatever. And then you break, you stretch or whatever you need to do, and you refresh your mind, and then you enter into meditation. His Holiness the Dalai Lama said that's, as is well known in Buddhism, that's a very skillful and important point to note. Of course, sometimes if you're doing a tantric sadhana, you can't necessarily break up that way. There's another purpose in doing long sitting to develop another kind of endurance. But in general, if you're trying to develop single-pointed concentration, you might do in many short sessions. Even if you're doing a sadhana, when you're meditating on the deity, you do the sadhana first up to the point where you're meditating on yourself and the mandala, and then you might, you focus on that for some time, and then you relax, and then you again focus on that and relax, even within the same session. Okay. Sometimes you can break up into many shorter sessions also, where you can even walk outside in between, in which case you do a super abbreviated form of the sadhana before you do the next session. When your meditation has become somewhat stable, like say for instance, you've meditated in short sessions. When your meditation is getting stable, then you can elongate, lengthen the session. In all the sessions, make your practice free from the faults of being either too strict or excessively relaxed. I'm guessing amongst us, which of those two is going to be the more likely thing? Probably too strict, right? You're probably going to be too strict. And thereby sustain your meditation. In this way, you will have few obstacles and will overcome problems such as overtiredness, laxity, and lethargy. Okay. What to do in between sessions? Okay. What do we say in Tibetan? This Tibetan term for the in-between sessions. In general, there are many things to be done between meditation sessions, such as prostrations, circumambulation, here it says obeisance, circumambulation and recitation of prayers and scriptures. Doesn't mean the newspaper, right? However, the principal thing to do in this context is as follows. After you've made an effort to meditate in the actual session and are at a point of ending the session, you might not continue to rely on mindfulness and vigilance and might instead completely let go of what should be sustained, the object of meditation and its subjective aspects. So what this means is, at the end of the session, maybe you're counting the time. You're waiting for the person who's leading the prayer or yourself to reach the dedication prayer, and then you just let go, as though it's like recess. I remember when I was teaching Lama Osel at Sera, the reincarnation of Lama Yeshe, Lama Osel, we would end the session. We begin the session with motivation and end with dedication, and for a long time, as soon as the dedication was finished, Lama Osel would yell out, "Legos!" Do you know what Legos are? I never grew up with Legos. We had Lincoln Logs in our age, and Tinker Toys, and I don't know, some other kind of red brick. What those are called? But Legos. So his brother Kunken would be in the other room, and he would run off, and he would want to play. So we might be like that. Lama, I think, was sort of showing this probably what my mind is like. So he's giving me a lesson. Legos. As soon as the work is done, then you want to let go completely. So any kind of momentum that you've begun will be lost then. So if you're doing a meditation retreat, or if you're spending your life kind of like that as a meditative retreat, then in the post-meditation, you don't let go of the object of concentration completely. You still try to keep that in mind. Say if you're meditating on guru devotion. You start then to be able to see reflections of the teachings in everyday life. I've told you the story many times about Milarepa, right? And his bowl, clay bowl. No? I've done it so many times. How does it go?
His tattered cloth and his bowl, and one day he's outside and he drops his bowl and it breaks. But there was so much gunk in the bottom of the bowl that the shape...
What was the gunk?
Oh, tea.
Maybe nettles or something.
And so but it retained the shape of the bowl. And I think he
So he was really broken up, he started to cry, and...
He was devastated. He had to go back to Neiman Marcus and buy them. No, I think he took great joy in seeing the impermanence of everything.
Yeah, it became a teaching for him.
Because he had kept the continuity of many meditations, in post-meditation. Then you start to see, your everyday life. You see the truth of the Dharma in everyday life. I remember Lama Yeshe saying once, he said, many lamas are curious why, we at Kopan, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zoba, Rinpoche, why we at Kopan have so much success in sort of changing Westerners' minds and getting them interested in the Dharma, because other lamas don't have the same kind of success. And he said some of them attribute it to some, magic power or the protector or something like this. But Lama said, really what it is the truth of the Dharma. Once you see the Dharma, you start to think about it, you see the reality of it in everyday life. It's not just dogma, like the sutras say or something like this. You see the truth of it in everyday life. And it's this kind of sustaining of your meditation, not giving up the meditation completely, keeping it in mind in post-meditation, then you start to see the truth in everyday life. When you're talking to people and you're engaging in the activities that you usually engage in our up till now samsaric lives, keeping that mindfulness of the meditative subjects has an effect. You see things differently. So after you've made an effort to meditate, also the example of starting a fire. If you rub two sticks together and you get some friction, some heat, that's like the meditation session. You've got something going. Maybe the faith is starting to grow, or some confidence that you can understand impermanence and death, or the Four Noble Truths, or whatever. You get that going in meditation. Then you just let it go, and post meditation you go out and have you just do other things. You completely leave that subject behind. All of that momentum that you've started, all of the heat, you might say, will be dissipated. Like the person who tries to start a fire, rubbing the sticks together a long, long time, and then they let it go. They have a cup of tea. They start again. All the heat is gone. Maybe there's a little help because it's a little bit dried out the next time, but you won't get close to starting a fire, the fire of wisdom. Okay, so after you've made an effort to meditate in the actual session and are at the point of ending the session, you might not continue to rely on mindfulness and vigilance, and might instead completely let go of what should be sustained. What should be sustained? The object of meditation and its subjective aspects, how you're meditating on that. Remember the guru and the way that the objective aspect would be the qualities, the subjective aspects would be faith, let's say. If you don't let go, if you do let go, your progress will be extremely small. Therefore, even in between sessions, look at the teachings that reveal the meaning of your object of meditation and recollect it again and again, continuously. Accumulate by many means the collections, means of merit and wisdom, which are favorable conditions for producing good qualities. Also clear away by many means the obscurations, which are unfavorable conditions. It means negative karma and other, the other kinds of obscurations, karmic obscurations and others. By applying what you know, strive at whatever vow you have promised to observe, as this is the basis of everything. So whenever we do meditation, we try to at least keep the vow of refuge, if not pratimoksha vow, if you've taken pratimoksha vow of a lay person, say the 5 vows or some portion thereof, or the vow of a monk or nun, or the bodhisattva vow, or the tantric vow. Strive in trying to keep those vows, observe those vows. Here it's observe doesn't mean, it means guard. It doesn't mean just like observing, I got vows. Well, I broke it, what to do? Not like that. Observe means to guard, to safeguard, right? We do use it that way, don't we? Observe caution. Observe the rules. Yeah, observe the rules. It doesn't mean just, we do use the word that way, so it means guard, keep them. In addition, follow the instruction called consolidation with regard to training the mind in the object of meditation and its subjective aspects, the observing vows, and accumulating the collections. I don't know that instruction. Maybe in Geshe Zopa's book I didn't see. Did it mention? Has someone, no one's read ahead? Right? Consolidate, where it says here, it doesn't mention? Okay. Okay. So it doesn't mention what that, I'm not sure what that refers to. We have to ask Lama, who's his, maybe the other commentaries mention that. Furthermore, learn the four preconditions which are causes that readily produce the paths of serenity and insight. So this is the section that often is not mentioned in, just a general presentation of the Lam Rim. Four preconditions which are causes that readily produce the paths of calm abiding and penetrative insight, shamatha and vipassana. Here it says serenity and insight. So what are those causes? Restraining the sense faculties, acting vigilantly, appropriate diet, and striving to practice without sleeping at the wrong time and acting properly at the time of sleep. Did that sound like 5? As you can see, it's divided up. The last one is about sleeping at the wrong time and acting properly at the time of sleep, or 1. So, restraining the sense faculties. This is interesting. Yes?
Just go back to the last one. This is meant figuratively, not literally, about the sleeping. Is that what they mean here? Sorry? It's just
sort of allegorical or something, right? Right? Is that what you're saying? No. I know that, but you were happy to hear that it sounded like I was saying that. Striving to practice without sleeping at the wrong time, and acting properly at the time of sleep. What's wrong with that? You don't want to sleep at the wrong. You might say, well, we might say there's no wrong time. Sleep is good. In general, we could say if you need to sleep, you need to sleep. Of course, if you're sick, if you're overly tired, you shouldn't try to force yourself. But here, as you will see, this is talking about if you're doing a continuous practice over a long period of time, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, you try not to sleep during the day, nor in the first part of the night, nor in the last part of the night just before dawn. Just a certain period in the night, a few hours, sometimes even the 2, 3, 4 hours. I don't know how many hours the Dalai Lama sleeps, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche for many years took the aspect of, maybe even still, not sleeping at night and doing virtuous practices. So at the monasteries, at Sera, when it started getting late, and you might think, certainly the young boys would go to sleep, but the older monks who had memorized, when the mind started to get a little bit dull, too dull for study or meditation, so too dull for meditation or for study, they would recite the scriptures that they had memorized, because that's something you can do with even a little more hazy mind, perhaps a little more fatigued mind. So you could hear them walking up and down the paths outside the houses, either in their own house or on the roof or on the paths, reciting the texts that they had memorized, or carrying text with them and memorizing some new texts. And then they would sleep, and those who were very ardent would sleep only a certain few hours in the middle of the night, and they would get up early and then again begin practices. So those kinds of practices shouldn't be done until the mind has started to get a little bit calm, I think, a little bit controlled. Otherwise, you'll be stressing yourself very much. There's certain kind of practices that we can maybe wish to be able to do, to act like Lama Zopa Rinpoche did without sleeping at night. But if we force ourselves to try to do that, we don't have the facility. Our minds, our errors are not centered, and we will fatigue ourselves too much and become susceptible to different kinds of problems, lung, depression. Sometimes spirits can take advantage of you. I think I told you the story of a Spanish monk who, newly ordained, who tried to do a lot of meditation without sleeping and not eating, and tried to be very ascetic, thinking this was the way to go. And he was possessed, more or less, by some spirit. He started to do Tai Chi. His girlfriend said he never knew how to do Tai Chi at all. Suddenly he was doing this fantastic kind of Tai Chi outside when he couldn't remember doing it, so he was under the possession of something else. And eventually, there's a long story about this, but eventually Kirti Sanchab Rinpoche was able to, in one episode when he was completely under the control of this spirit, Rinpoche poured some water in his mouth that he'd blown the mantra of Avalokiteshvara on, and poured it in his mouth. The spirit left. And Rinpoche told him subsequently that because he was practicing too strictly and he didn't have an accumulation of merit and still had a lot of negative karma, that the spirit that was bothering him had some greater ability to get some foothold, so that what he should do is practice less at this point, less strictly, to take refuge again and again, to try to generate merit. Whenever he noticed something he wasn't really in control of things, which is probably how we feel all the time anyway, right? Okay. Whenever he felt he wasn't in control of his mind, he should try to take refuge in particular, and then slowly, over the years, to try to collect merit so that he wouldn't be in that situation. So doing this kind of practice, if done without some guidance, although you can have a virtuous mind in doing it, you might be pushing yourself too much. So it's, from a certain point of view, it's better to have a long, continuous practice rather than a short, sporadic practice. It's more advantageous. But if your only choice was one or the other, and you couldn't have a long, continuous practice, then do a short, sporadic practice. Do something very, very intense for a short time, if you can. So what are these? I'll just sort of introduce this because we don't have a lot of time now, I guess, right? There are restraining the sense faculties. So what this means is, here it says there are 5 parts of this section. The first of which is that with which you restrain the sense faculties. What do you restrain the sense faculties from? You restrain them with a constant maintenance of your mindfulness and a continuous persistence at mindfulness. Well, that's with which you restrain them. With respect to these two, the first, maintaining your mindfulness, means that you practice your mindfulness repeatedly without forgetting the teachings about restraining the sense faculties, as well as the other 3 preconditions. The second, continuously persisting at mindfulness, means that you practice your mindfulness continuously and with respect. What you are restraining is the 6 faculties, and what you are restraining them from is, or should I say are, the 6 attractive and 6 unattractive sensory objects. So it's interesting. So what does that mean? You shouldn't look at pretty things? You shouldn't look at handsome guys? You shouldn't allow your tongue to taste chocolate? What does it mean? Pardon? Your relationship with the attractive guys. The chocolate. I just tease. So this is something very, very interesting. In the Bodhisattvacharya Vatara, Shantideva mentions that when you're out walking, so let's say the monk, classic monk, Theravada monk, or the Bodhisattva who's keeping that kind of discipline, shouldn't allow themselves to just look anywhere and allow the senses to sort of become attached to things. When you see something that can cause attachment to arise, let's say if it's another person, or if you think about something that can cause attachment to arise, like fame, you hear someone else is getting famous, and attachment can arise to that. Okay? Or if you see something that's irritating to you, a particular person or a particular kind of, I don't know, sound or doctrine or something, you have to be able to, if you don't pay attention, if you don't restrain your senses, guard your senses, it's possible that by coming in contact with that hostility and anger can arise, right? So remember in the 12 links, well, we know from, let's say from other studies also, there are 3 main conditions for a consciousness to arise. Who can I ask? Who studied low rig here? My sister. What are the 3 conditions for a consciousness to arise? Do you know?
Let's see, the dominant condition.
Which is what?
The, let's see, the object. No, it's not the object. The object.
So the object, say in terms of eye consciousness, you need an object of eye consciousness, form or color, shape or color.
Yes.
Then?
And then you need the faculty.
The nose, right?
Yes, the nose faculty.
To see the object.
No, just no.
No, I could see you're getting sleepy, so
Yes,
I thought
I
I'd
am. I'm
tease you.
sorry.
So
I'm drifting off.
So I was just teasing, I'm taking advantage unfairly. So you need a faculty, like a physical interface between the consciousness and the object. The object, in our case,
It would be kind of a inverted image by the lens on the retina, right? And the consciousness, a previous moment of the consciousness, those 3. So, dominant condition is what? The
faculty, right?
Yeah.
Condition was the object.
No, dominant condition
is the faculty, or you say empowering condition. The objective condition, or referent condition, is the object. Mikyan, we say in Tibetan. The dominant condition is what we say dakkyan, or possessive condition. Dak, like in self. And then the immediately preceding condition is called the demadakyan. Tematak. Tematak means immediately. Tematakyan. And so those 3 coming together could give rise to consciousness. So those 3 conditions then can precipitate the mental factor contact, remember? Which empowers the faculty, let's say the eye consciousness, to be a support of consciousness. Sort of like, maybe kind of like priming the pump. You know, the first time you push down on the pump handle, the water doesn't come out immediately, unless it's been primed before, right? I kind of think of the contact a little bit like that. It's somehow the consciousness, the object, and the sense power coming together. That mental factor contact for one instant present then allows the consciousness to arise, having within that sense faculty, and then coming in contact with a pleasant object. What can arise next after contact? Feeling, a pleasant feeling, let's say. If it's called an attractive object, it's called attractive because it gives rise to a pleasant feeling, right? Right, Georgia? Say well, I mean, like, are there some objects which are just by nature attractive objects? Chocolate is an attractive object? Yeah. So if you give to a Tibetan Lama who's lived in isolated cave for 80 years, a piece of chocolate, he'll undoubtedly feel pleasure putting it on his tongue. Right? Okay, so things are not attractive from their own side, right? It depends on our karma. So of course they are. So the Mona Lisa or whatever, Beethoven, are not necessarily attractive. It depends upon one's karma, and also intellectually. one's predisposition this lifetime. So certain kinds of objects that you encounter will give rise to feelings. The feeling themselves are not the problem. It's your response to the feelings. So until you get to the point where you can control your response to the feelings, you can control hostility toward unpleasant feelings and obliterate attachment for pleasant feelings, you have to depend on the restraint of the sense faculties. So we're going to talk more about that next time. So restrain your faculties this week, and see if you can read this section both in the commentary on this. This is something that's not usually elaborated on in Lam Rim teachings, because usually there's not enough time. And we'll talk about it next time, okay? So let us dedicate. We're not going to do the Prayer of Samantabhadra, but we're going to dedicate as we usually do. First, try to calm your mind. Then think of the merits that we've created tonight due to our motivation, the merits that we've created in the past that have not yet ripened, that are still on our mind stream, even the merits that we will create in the future. And make a strong aspiration, a dedication. Dedicate them, sort of set them aside in your mind. Think, due to these merits, may I progress along the Bodhisattva path, even this lifetime. In so doing, become less harmful to myself and others, eventually be able to help others and myself in a substantial spiritual way. In whatever number of lives it takes in the future, may I achieve thereby the state of enlightenment from which I can benefit all living beings spontaneously, as the Buddhas of the past have been able to do. Help those beings who have the karma to be saved by me, in particular, spontaneously, without any need to conceptualize, set them into the path that leads to their own ultimate happiness. Due to these very merits, may these merits ripen in that way. Especially due to these merits, may whatever obstacles there are to practicing devotion to the spiritual friend be overcome. May the insights be quickly achieved. And try to seal the dedication as well as you know within the emptiness of the three spheres. The emptiness of the merits, the emptiness of the objects dedicated to the goals, and the emptiness of the active dedication. All of them appear and function conventionally, but are empty of true existence, merely being conceptually, verbally designated. But although empty, the law of cause and effect still is infallible.